again, the true expert is all about just helping somebody else understand something, and usually not overcomplicating it, right? And also not oversimplifying it. So, especially since most of everybody's gaming nowadays is virtual, and even if it's not online, everyone pretty much has access to some kind of device with a Wi-Fi connection, right? If you're listening to this podcast, it's that device. You know, it's easier now more than ever to just Google a rule, you know. So and that's the thing I really encourage DMs to get their players in the habit of doing, because now that'll speed up games that could be slowed down otherwise. So for example, the dim light rule references lightly obscured, which is a condition of vision, right? Now, when you have a player and they look up something like fog cloud, and it's like there's an area that's heavily obscured, that doesn't just mean, it's not flavor text, you know? That's mechanics text, which impacts the game state. So rather than just be like, oh, now you have a fog cloud, you have to look up what heavily obscured means. And that way you're training your players to look for the mechanical things that will allow them to clearly make decisions, as opposed to sort of kind of make decisions and then, you know, be surprised at the outcome because it wasn't how they thought it would work, right? And the more you empower your players to make clear decisions, the more trust they're going to have in you as a DM. And that, of course, is the magic thing, right? The more trust you have as a DM, now you can start doing cooler things. And now, when you start implementing homebrew, it's not going to slow down your game. I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. One of the reasons my latest campaign, which is heavily homebrewed, is working so successfully is because I spent the first 5 years of our gaming training everybody to the rules as written, training them to look for specific mechanics text and to have very clear choices that they look up ahead of time, so that now when I add in a homebrew term or a homebrew system, it's nothing that they can't handle, because it's not about knowing the rules, it's about having a process of learning rules, right? And then learning those rules over time. So does heavily obscured come up a lot? It might not in your game, right? But in something like Curse of Strahd, where there's an evil mist, you know, that hides dangers in the dark, that might be a super relevant rule. One last example I have of this happened in a game last night when I used the Calm Emotion spell, where Calm Emotions, one of the effects you can do is you can force a certain number of humanoids in an area to make a charisma save, and if they fail, you get to choose an effect. One is to take away Charmed or Frightened, right? Which are conditions that are very clear. Most players know that. But another effect is you can take a creature that is hostile and you can instead make it indifferent. That is a mechanical condition in 5th edition. It's not just, oh, they're all friends now. It's like, no, you can look up what it means to be a hostile creature. That's why DMs that are like, friends is the most broken cantrip, I heavily disagree with them, because friends clearly states it's a non-hostile creature you get advantage on, right? Once the spell ends, that creature becomes hostile, meaning you can't friends again, right? And what does hostile mean? Hostile means that they're going to try to impede the efforts of the creature they're hostile towards, right? It's like a relationship condition, and as weird as it sounds, these are all narrative terms that can help a DM leverage into better descriptions. They're also mechanics terms. There is a very clear definition of what these different kinds of conditions mean in the context of your game world and your game state, right? So, and that's more what I'm encouraging DMs to do. Don't try to take away from that mechanics text, because that's going to withdraw your players' trust. And again, this isn't like a philosophical argument. These are patterns that I've observed over time. I've seen DMs that try to do this, their players end up frustrated most of the time, right? The clearer you are with your mechanics, the faster you can get the mechanics out of the way so that you can invest more energy in storytelling, which is why most people are here to begin with. If they didn't want storytelling, they'd play Warhammer. They'd play a different kind of war game.
You brought up hostility and basically the social interaction preface for when you're talking to an NPC that's not actively attacking you, I guess. And there's actually rules for this in the DMG that I personally have been trying to look towards more often. These rules pertain to the difficulty class of getting that NPC to do something in your favor. There's these 3 different relationship conditions for NPCs towards the player characters. The first one is friendly, which means that they are, most likely to do something for you out of the 3 of these. So DC of 0 is that this NPC will offer help without taking risks towards themselves. Very easy to talk to, very easy to get help from, like, for example, a shopkeeper that really likes you. It's pretty easy to negotiate with this person. The DC 10 gives that if you roll a 10, for example, on a persuasion check, the NPC will help even if small risks are involved. And a DC of 20 is the NPC will take big risks for the sake of the PCs. Going on to indifferent, the NPC offers no help but does no harm. And then the DC 10 means that the NPC will help as long as no risks are involved. And DC 20 means that they will help even if small risks are involved. So you can see there's this casual progression of an NPC being less and less likely to do something risky for you, basically. When you get to hostile, it's very different. If a hostile creature is being negotiated with at a DC of 0, they oppose the PCs, like John said, and they may take risks to do so. Additionally, at DC 10, the NPC offers no help but does no harm. And then at a DC 20, the NPC will help as long as there are no risks involved. This is also something, like John was saying, this is a mechanics thing that we as DMs can show the players and teach the players about through the social interactions that they have. Of course, this requires that the players are like, I want to get something from this character, or I want to persuade them to stop doing something. I want to intimidate them to stop doing something. All these social interaction skill checks come into play when you consider whether or not they are friendly, indifferent, or hostile. And it's very important to understand those depending on the environment that you're in. There was another scenario of the Raw that I've been learning a lot more about lately, which is that invisibility isn't just a get out of jail free card. I looked it up, and there's actually a lot of rules that go into invisibility. Now, you as the DM have the choice of whether or not you want to hand wave these, but like we've been saying, understanding the Raw allows you to make decisions and adjustments in the game that make it more fun for your players. And if things are too clunky, knowing the Raw will balance out your homebrew rulings. So the thing with invisibility is that, first of all, you are considered heavily obscured, as if you were in total darkness. So that means that your attacks have advantage against, the defender, and attackers against you have disadvantage if they know where you are. Because they're heavily obscured, they don't provoke opportunity attacks when they walk away. So if I cast invisibility and I'm right next to you, and you're going to swing at me on your next turn, and I know that, then I cast invisibility and I can just kind of out of there, just like with darkness for warlocks. It's not just about invisibility, because if your character casts invisibility and doesn't take the hide action, then they are not considered hidden, which means that which means that the enemy knows that your character is invisible and moved 5 feet away from that character. Basically, they may have disadvantage and all that stuff to hit them, but they know, generally speaking, what direction they went. So that's why it's interesting then, because it's not just I'm invisible and I walk away and they'll never find me ever again. It's I'm invisible, but if I don't take the hide action, they can just perceive where I am, basically, even if they can't see me as a whole. the reason a lot of DMs hand wave this is because it's so complicated. It's the same thing with dark vision. There are so many references going around. You need to know what heavily obscured means. You need to know what provokes opportunity attack or does not provoke opportunity attack. You need to know what the hide action does. So all of these things need to be in the DM's head because they need to be able to tell the players and introduce them to this mechanic in an efficient way where they learn, basically. The way D&D is set up, it is elegant and the rules are balanced, generally speaking, and they refer to each other in a balanced way. It's just that you need to kind of know what all the rules are so you can put the whole puzzle together in general.
Thank you so much for listening to some of our podcast highlights. This podcast is part of the Darkmoor Podcast Network. If you want to support the content creators, feel free to visit our Patreon. And please, game responsibly.